Every story requires a setting, a backdrop for your tale to exist within. But if you want to breathe life into that background scenery, you must first work to make it feel like a world in of itself. Capture the imagination of your audience and, hopefully, make them feel like the story is only a fraction of what your world truly has to offer. Hi, I'm Mike from the Lawbreakers, and today I'm going to be talking about a few different ideas for adding depth and complexity to your fictional worlds. Now, we spoke a little during our last podcast about different worlds we enjoy and how they've been built as works of fiction. From the in-depth and elegantly linked backstories and histories of the Sly Cooper game series, to the convoluted web of reports, timelines, and world-changing absurdity that is the SCP universe, they capture the imagination and give plenty to explore for anyone willing to drop and have a look just that little bit deeper. So, I'm going to, over the course of this video, just go over a few extra ideas to consider. For each of these, I'm going to focus on a particular point to consider that helps add a bit more intricacy to your creation. The three I've picked in this instance being culture, history, and rumour. There's many more, of course, but these are just the ones I've decided to talk about today, so yeah. Oh, and sorry in advance for the lights being out. We're still getting everything set up here, so with any luck you'll be able to see me next time. Don't worry about it. 1. Culture. Now let's talk a little bit about establishing culture. Just to lead with an example, the first one I'm going to talk about is the festival. This is a staple of any good mystery novel or video game bonus level. Lots of bright colours, smiling faces, and light-hearted activities to provide an easy and effective backdrop to anything you want, really. Want to have a harvest festival where the locals chase a young maid through the village, like in Spice and Wolf? Go for it. Just try to ignore the fact that the villagers once burned those young maidens alive as an offering to an eldritch forest god. You know, in order to bring about a bountiful harvest and ward off a severe famine in the past. A rather nasty little bit of history there that has been watered down by a century or two of hand-me-down traditions until nowadays the only thing that gets set on fire is a bright green herb ribbon. Maybe tossed into the festival bonfire at sunset. Now from there you've got plenty of interesting details to explore. Do the village elders still murder travellers in secret to keep up their pact with the ancient god? Perhaps our over-eager main character manages to catch the maiden before any of the villagers can, triggering a weird footnote in tradition that pins him or her as the destined love interest to be. Will the villagers try to keep them from leaving afterwards? How will these people react to outsiders stepping in on their traditions? And what are the consequences, associated with this? Both positive and negative. Also, just referring back to that previously mentioned famine for a second, how has this turmoil affected their day-to-day lives? Do they still store food and valuables in a concealed room under their homes? Do the farmers still attach a second hooked blade to their scythes that they use to work the fields? Even though the time where bands of starving bandits roaming the countryside has long since passed into history. But let's have a look at it from a wider world builder's perspective. Perhaps the famine was caused by a great war or natural disaster that has ravaged the landscape elsewhere in your story. So you can see this represented in the habits and traditions of the local people. Though, of course, cultural shifts like this can come from many places, not all of them necessarily negative. On that note, let's move across to another example. Cultural shift by exchange. I'd like for you to imagine for me the city of Newport, a grand old city built purely around trade and fishing, a hub for foreign visitors of every stock and a stopping off point for many a dignitary from lands far, far away. With such a massive amount of exposure, you could easily argue that those interactions with the merchants from across the sea has created a sort of explosive renaissance in fashion and language that isn't really seen anywhere else in the kingdom. There's plenty of ways to go and have fun with this concept, and honestly, it could take many forms that you might not initially expect. Stylish clothing and gilded decor filling the chambers of the Baroness's court, is usually the most common, sure, and combined with its fair share of scandalous fraternizations and dangerous political shenanigans. We've all read Berserk. Though, remember, this exposure is happening everywhere. Not just in the noble houses, but they're everywhere, all the way down to the common dock worker who's just picked up a fun new way of telling the town guard to fuck off at closing time down the local tavern. Oh, and just to try and wrap up this point here, because I don't want to talk about it too long, try to think about something for me. How would our humble farmer react if suddenly confronted with one of these Newport City dwellers? Would they be curious, intrigued perhaps? Or would they react poorly, seeing these finely dressed city folk as a sign of portraying something significant to their culture? Food for thought. Oh, number 2, history. Okay, now let me start off by saying that no one's expecting a Silmarillion or Dance of Dragons out of everyone. Not every book or game needs its own version of the Forgotten Realms, filled to bursting with several thousand years worth of dedicated storytelling. What doesn't hurt, though, is giving a little bit of thought to how your world got to where it is today, and how you can reflect that in your storytelling and how you portray your world building to your audience. For an example, let's say that our setting is City 247. The year is 3052 and the world has evolved into a barely stable gaggle of monstrous megacity states. Basically, if you've seen Judge Dredd or played Cyberpunk, you know the kind of thing I'm talking about. Now, you just know that such a dramatic shift from the world we live in today, to that dystopian handbasket, has just got to have some interesting events in it that took us right on that merry trip to hell. Don't just spit it out, though. I mean, no one likes an out-of-context exposition dump. Instead, play with it a little. Let's say, for example, that our main character's an investigator working for the local news. There's been a mysterious string of mechanical mishaps scattered at random across the city. You can be sure plenty of disappearances to go right along with them. And as our, the intrepid, investigator digs deeper into the lower levels of this megacity, you'll start to see them unveil the layers of history the further down they go. People living out of the old city spires of New York, Tokyo, or the ruins of old Venice now sunk beneath the sewers of this new world. You start to uncover where exactly in our world City 247 is, and you start seeing evidence of how it developed into the cyberpunk hellhole. Radioactive waste pits or ancient mechanical war machines from a bygone era that still stalk the depths, just waiting for someone to trigger the hunter-killer programming. Yet, just in the glimpse that our character gets before escaping from one into a side tunnel, they spot a peculiar insignia upon its hull. 2 red crosses set against a background of white and blue. I suppose the best advice I can really give here is don't just tell, show. FromSoft's Soulsborne Ring series is an excellent example of this. Yes, before it's pointed out, FromSoft do post massive paragraphs of text for, the majority of their world building, but it's the work the community goes into that puts all the points together from these scattered locations, both text-based and stuff that's visible from within their game worlds, that really shows the craft of it. The world breathes and openly shows the result of their histories openly on their sleeves without just smacking you across the jowls with it. You can tell that Yharnam or Anor Londo are realms in decline with rich histories as they come to their end, whether you're walking through beast-savage streets or abyss-stricken halls of the gods. You can see this displayed clearly, all without reading a word of an item description. 3. Rumour. So, rumours. Now, what do I mean when I say this? Basically, the rest of your world doesn't just stop just because the window of perception for the audience isn't immediately pointed at it. So try to conceal plot hooks, foreshadowing, or indeed bits of background lore as just tidbits of information, rumours passed between friends, or snippets overheard from a passing conversation. Your main character, your perspective, doesn't just swallow everything within this world. So give the reader who's got a wider periphery a snippet or a snapshot of that from time to time. Just a glance. Moving on to an example then. Let's have our main character walk into a bar. Since I'm recording this shortly after Zach's posted his Cosmic Horror sidekicks, I'm gonna have a little bit of fun with this one, so fuck it. Good luck editing this one, mate. I'm looking forward to what you do with it. Nyarlathotep walks into a bar. It's downtown Earlye on a dreary Thursday afternoon. Outside, the rain is falling up into the heavens, and the failing light paints the establishment a dim shade of the colour out of space. Hasta, an old friend, tends to the bar, and watches the eldritch being shift forwards and transform into one of the bar stools as he soils a glass with one tendril. So, where do we go from here? In one corner, you could have an old television set still running with the same newsreel for the past 300 years, yet the contents are always seen different each time. A story from the surface world about a lecturer from the Miskatonic University coming to Massachusetts to give a speech on some new astrological, event. Or perhaps it could be Hasta simply chatting to his friend about the local happenings. Maybe there's been a spree of reanimations lately and some crazy scientist on the street has been screaming that the awakening was upon them. Or maybe he just overhears two Migo in the corner chatting about some new formless cacophony making the charts. See what you fit in. And as long as it doesn't get in the way of your actual storytelling, the reason you're there, go mad. Since at the end of the day, people love to gossip. They will talk about anything, from the colour of Cthulhu's underwear to the latest scandal where Kasogtha was spotted at a black mass with Dagon. All of this makes for brilliant setup pieces for plot hooks later down the line. Maybe the main character has a run-in with an elder god escaping the paparazzi, or you could just be giving your readers or players some interesting background information to listen to. Everyone loves a chatty up character who always has a few drop lines about the latest things going on in the world. Vermintide's Franz Lohner or Dernan from D&D's Yawning Portal Tavern, wonderful examples of this. Everyone loves these characters, so don't hesitate to give someone for your audience to bounce off of when interacting. Okay, I could keep going, but frankly I've talked for more than long enough as it is, so I'm gonna call it here. Remember to like and subscribe if you haven't already, and leave a comment down below whilst you're at it. Let us know what you think. Is there a particular topic you want us to ramble on about? Let us know. Honestly, we'd love to hear from you. Alright, this has been Mike from the Lawbreakers. I'll end it here. See ya.